Hi, I'm Shannon. At my father's funeral, someone pressed a broom into my hands. Mom leaned over and whispered, "The maid stays in the back." They blocked me from his casket because I was adopted, so I stayed silent until a sealed letter was read aloud. They didn't just freeze, they fell apart. Before we dive in, tell me, have you ever been treated like a stranger in your own family? Drop a comment below. I read everyone. I arrived just before the clouds broke open, the kind of overcast sky that made the entire town feel like it was holding its breath. The parking lot was already full, cars lined in precise rows, Cadillacs, Lexuses, a vintage Rolls someone probably rented just for the occasion. I tucked the watch into my coat pocket, the one my father used to wind each night before bed, and stepped out onto the gravel. The church looked exactly as I remembered from Sundays long past: white clapboard, black shutters, and a modest steeple. The bell didn't toll. Funerals at Calvary Baptist weren't that kind of dramatic. Everything was always restrained. I made my way toward the front entrance, the one where the family entered. My heels clicked against the stone path, a soft, steady rhythm I tried to match with my breath. But just as my hand touched the brass door handle, a shadow fell over me. "Shannon," my mother whispered sharply, appearing at my side, "that door is for real family. Real family." The words hit harder than the cold. She didn't look at me, just smoothed down her black wool coat, adjusted her pearl earrings, and turned away as if I were someone else's awkward guest. A secretary, maybe, or worse. I didn't say anything. I just took the long way around the church, the wind needling through my coat, whispering along the hedges like it had something cruel to say too. Inside, the warmth only made the chill worse. The sanctuary smelled of roses and floor polish. Dozens of guests were already seated, murmuring in tones too polite to be honest. I scanned the rows. First, 3 pews reserved, white ribbons tied to the edges. My sisters, Darlene and Rhonda, sat in the front. Both wore matching veils like they were staging a photo shoot for some twisted Southern Gothic magazine cover. I made my way toward the middle aisle, choosing a seat in the back near the door. No one looked my way, not once. Not even the ushers, who'd known me since I was 6, offered a nod. My name wasn't in the program. I flipped through it just to be sure. It read like a story I'd never lived. 3 daughters, it said, 2 grandsons, not even a mention of adoption, not even a line about my work at the town library, the one he used to brag about when I was little. They'd erased me like whiteout on old paper. No smudge, just gone. When I quietly slid 1 pew closer, just to hear the choir better, Darlene turned around. She tilted her head, loud enough for the rows around her to hear, "The maid's trying to join the mourners." Soft chuckles, then silence. Heads turned. All of them. I felt 100 eyes press into my skin like thumbtacks. That's when my mother, my adoptive mother, stood up. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She just looked at me with that pinched smile she used when she donated money at town fundraisers. "You're just a charity case, Shannon. Don't make a scene today." I didn't make a scene. I just sat down, hands folded neatly in my lap, the watch ticking like a heartbeat against my wrist. I looked straight ahead, lips pressed together, spine straight. I didn't cry. The service continued. Rhonda spoke first, voice trembling with the kind of fake nostalgia that played well in church. She spoke about fishing trips and piano recitals, stories where I had always been present, but now, somehow, I'd been edited out. Then Darlene followed, more polished, more venom behind the sugar. She told the room how their father had built everything from nothing, a real American man with 3 beautiful daughters who loved him more than anything. 3. They never once looked back. Not even when the choir sang his favorite hymn. I thought I could stomach it all. But when the casket remained closed and the family was called up one by one to say their final goodbyes, I wasn't among them. Not even as an afterthought. So I stayed put. The pastor began his closing words. Something about legacy, about living on in those we love. And then, a man in a dark suit walked in from the side door, holding an envelope in gloved hands. He looked confused. Nervous. Sorry to interrupt, he said, loud enough that even those dozing in the back lifted their heads. This was found in the funeral director's office. It's labeled, "To be read at the end of the service." He held it up. My heart stopped. It was his handwriting, those bold, deliberate letters, black ink, clean slant. No one moved. The pastor cleared his throat. "I suppose it's only right we honor the request." He opened the envelope and unfolded the single sheet inside. I couldn't breathe. Everyone leaned forward as he began to read. I wasn't meant to hear my father's voice that day, but suddenly, it was echoing through every silence they forced me to live in. The silence that followed was the kind you could feel pressing against your ribs. I didn't move. No one did. The funeral director stood still at the pulpit, the sealed envelope trembling slightly in his hands, either from nerves or reverence I couldn't tell. His voice broke the air with a low, respectful tone. "This was left with us by Dr. Frederick Jameson," he said, clearing his throat. "It's marked to be opened and read at the end of his funeral." A few pews ahead, someone whispered, "Oh, God," under their breath. Another voice muttered, "What is this, a will reading?" But all I could hear was the pounding in my ears. I sat straighter, my father's old pocket watch heavy in my lap, my hands still folded neatly like they had been all morning. I hadn't been allowed to cry. I'd swallowed every emotion, every glance, every insult. But now, with that letter in the director's hand, I felt something shift. He began to read. To the daughter I was never allowed to call my own in front of others. Shannon. There was a collective gasp. Not a loud one, but sharp enough to slice through the tension hanging above us. Across the aisle, my oldest sister Maura dropped her funeral bouquet. White lilies clattered to the ground, a few petals scattering under the pews. My brother's hand froze mid-air as he was reaching for his wife's, and my mother's spine stiffened like a drawn bow. Her face turned pale, bloodless, her lips pressed together, almost vanishing. The director continued, slowly. Each word was a weight being laid at the center of the sanctuary. "I am sorry. Sorry that I failed to speak louder when I should have. Sorry that I allowed the silence around you to shape your worth. Sorry that my pride never matched your loyalty." A lump formed in my throat, sharp and raw. I wasn't prepared for this. I didn't expect anything. I didn't think he'd left anything behind for me. He hadn't been allowed to, and yet, here he was, cutting through years of forced distance in a voice I hadn't heard since the machines took over his breath. "My daughter, you were never an obligation. You were my greatest blessing. The way you held my hand while the others squabbled over stocks, the way you shielded me from my own bitterness. You showed up when they didn't even bother." Heads were turning now. People looked at me, not with pity, but curiosity, shock, maybe even guilt. I didn't look back. My eyes were fixed on the front, on the letter in the director's hand, as if it might disappear if I blinked. "She's not even blood," Maura hissed. The words weren't meant to carry, but they did, and they cracked louder than any sermon had that morning. But the letter kept going. "I know what they said about you behind closed doors, that you were the charity case, the outsider. I let them say it, and I hate myself for it, because you were the one who sat beside me every night at the hospital, reading aloud from the newspaper when my eyes gave out. You were the one who rubbed lotion on my hands when they cracked. You never asked for anything. You just stayed." Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't wipe them away. Not this time. "I don't leave you this letter out of guilt. I leave it to correct a lie. I leave you my journals, my real inheritance, my legacy, not of money, but of truth, because you're the only one who lived it with me." The director lowered the paper, his voice thick. There was no applause, no outburst. Just silence again, but this time it was different. It wasn't the cold, dismissive quiet I had grown used to. This was a quiet filled with tension and exposed nerves, the kind that settles in after a wall has come crashing down. I didn't move. I couldn't. I felt the pew beneath me, the warmth of the watch in my lap, the way my breath was shallow and careful. Not because I was afraid, but because something had cracked open inside me, and it felt like light. My mother finally stood. Her heels clicked sharply on the floor as she turned to the director. "This is inappropriate," she said. "This should have gone through the family first." He gave a small, polite shrug. Dr. Jameson's instructions were clear. I was to read it publicly, no exceptions. Her face darkened. I could feel her fury radiate across the room, but for once, she didn't look at me. She just gathered her purse, adjusted her coat, and walked out, like she couldn't bear to sit through the consequences of the very silence she'd curated for years. Behind her, Maura followed, scoffing under her breath. My brother, hesitating, lingered at the door for a beat too long before leaving too. But others stayed. An old colleague of my father's gave me a small nod. A woman from the church choir whispered something like, "He really loved you." And an usher gently touched my shoulder as he passed, not saying anything, but I didn't need him to. I sat there long after the letter had been folded and returned to its envelope, long after the whispers had softened, because I wasn't ready to stand. Not yet. Not because I was stunned by what he said, but because part of me had always known. He had just finally said it out loud. And in that truth, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the outsider anymore. That letter cracked the sanctuary, but the aftershocks followed us home. Early afternoon light slanted through thin November clouds as I parked outside the family house. White siding, navy shutters, manicured lawn that suddenly looked too perfect, like a photograph set in front of a storm. Dad's lawyer, Mr. Randall, had called while I was still in the church foyer. "Your mother insists on a brief gathering," he said, voice restrained. "I'll bring something your father left for you." So I went. Not because she'd summoned me, but because his voice, even from the grave, still sounded like a hand on my shoulder. Inside, the air smelled of coffee that had been reheated one time too many. People stood in clusters, whispering the way folks do after a funeral when conversation feels disloyal. Eyes followed me down the hallway. Cousins, old church friends, a few colleagues from Dad's clinic, each gaze a question no one dared voice. My mother stood near the fireplace, her smile tight as fishing wire. "Shannon," she said, tone syrupy but splintered. "We're keeping this small, just family." I almost laughed. Family. The word felt heavier now, like a coat I could shrug off if I wanted. I only nodded, then turned as Mr. Randall approached, carrying a wooden box about the size of a thick novel. Brass hinges, tiny keyhole, my name burned into the lid. "Your father kept this in the hospital safe," he murmured. "Said it was for your hands only." Mother's nostrils flared. She pretended not to stare, but her head angled just enough to see. I thanked him quietly and slipped into the study, Dad's old sanctuary, lined with medical journals and jazz-age records. I shut the door before anyone could follow, placed the box on the mahogany desk, and traced the grooves of my name. My fingers trembled, but the movement felt electric, not weak. The key rested beneath the box, taped beneath like a childhood secret. Inside lay 3 items: a flash drive, 2 leather-bound journals worn soft at the edges, and a black ledger stamped Family Trust in gold lettering. The journals smelled of ink and aftershave. I lifted the ledger last. It felt like it pulsed in my palms. Pages of neat columns, dates, account numbers, wire transfers ran down the paper. Money funneling from Dad's medical partnership into shell LLCs I'd never heard of. Ocean Pine Holdings, Greyhaven Consulting. Next to each transaction, a set of initials: CJ, MJ, DJ, my mother, my sister Maura, my brother Dean. Amounts large enough to buy the whole town library twice over. I swallowed. The entries stretched back 7 years, while I'd been clipping grocery coupons and covering late fees at the apartment because my adjunct paycheck never arrived on schedule. Tucked into the middle of the ledger was a notarized letter, Dad's handwriting once again. I uncovered this pattern while reconciling the clinic accounts. Confrontation only drove them deeper underground. If you're reading this, Shannon, then my voice is gone and the silence is breaking open. Use these records wisely. Protect yourself first. My pulse roared in my ears. Betrayal flickered into fury, then settled into something steadier. Purpose. The last page held a single line, block letters pressed hard enough to dent the sheet beneath. You are the only honest one. I closed the book, noticing my reflection in the desk's glossy surface. Eyes red, posture straight. Voices rose outside the door. Mora, pitched high, and Mother, low and alarmed. I slipped the ledger and journals into my satchel, pocketed the flash drive, then opened the door. Conversation stopped like someone had yanked a cord. Mother's smile tried to reappear, but her eyes darted to the bag on my shoulder. "You find anything interesting in there?" Mora asked, sweet as a lemon rind. "Just memories," I said. "Things Dad wanted me to keep safe." Dean stepped forward, arms folded. "We all want to keep Dad's legacy safe. Maybe we should look at what he left." I met his stare. "He left instructions. I plan to follow them." Their expressions shifted, small, involuntary flinches, confirmation they sensed more than they knew. Mother opened her mouth, perhaps to order me to hand it over, but Mr. Randall reappeared, briefcase in hand. "Mrs. Jameson," he said, polite but firm, "I'll be contacting everyone with next steps regarding Dr. Jameson's personal effects." Mother pressed lips together so tightly, color vanished. She looked at me as if calculating how far she could push without witnesses. I held her gaze, not angry now, simply unmoved. I thanked Mr. Randall, slipped past the staring eyes, and stepped back into the chill afternoon. The sky was the same dull gray, but the air felt lighter against my skin, as if secrets prefer fresh oxygen once they're dragged into daylight. I unlocked my car, placed the satchel gently on the passenger seat, and sat behind the wheel for a moment, letting the engine hum. My hands still shook, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was the vibration of truth preparing to move. I didn't know what to do with that kind of power, but the moment I stepped back into the room, I realized they already suspected what I had, and they were terrified. I sat in the driveway for a full minute, engine idling, watching my breath ghost across the windshield. Inside that house, white pillars, brass knocker, a place that had never felt like mine, shadows moved behind lace curtains. They were waiting, not for grief, for control. I killed the engine, smoothed my skirt, and slipped the satchel strap across my chest so the weight of the ledger rested close to my heart. Whatever happened next, I would not let it leave my sight. The living room looked staged for a magazine spread, fireplace glowing, silver tray of untouched cookies, fresh hydrangeas already wilting in crystal vases. Carla sat in Father's wing-back chair. Morgan and Daniel flanked her on the sofa, hands folded like well-paid jurors. Their faces carried the polite tension of people expecting a confession. From me. Carla's voice dripped honey. "Shannon, dear, have a seat. We'd like to clear the air before rumors start." I remained standing. "Go ahead." She glanced at my bag, then offered a practiced smile. "This morning caught everyone off guard. Your speech, well, your father's letter, created confusion. None of us wants that cloud hanging over the family." "Confusion?" I tilted my head. "Sounded clear to me." Morgan gave a brittle laugh. "You're being emotional. Dad was medicated near the end. Hard to know what he meant." Daniel chimed in, softer. "He wanted peace. You stirring things up won't change what's already settled." I noticed a manila envelope on the coffee table, my name typed in capital letters. Carla slid it forward with red-tipped fingers. "Your father signed a revision months ago, relinquishing any claim you might imagine. He did it to protect you from legal headaches. We thought it kindest to spare you the paperwork earlier." Her kindness always felt like a cold draft under the door. I opened the envelope. Inside lay a single-page document waiving my inheritance, dated 6 weeks before Dad's stroke, signature shaky. No witness stamps, no attorney seal. I folded it once, then set it back on the table. "You went to quite a length for my comfort." Carla's smile tightened. We love you, Shannon. You'll always have a place in this family, just not in its legal obligations. Morgan crossed her legs, voice sugary. You work at a library. Estate matters are overwhelming. Accept what Mom's offering. Peace. I took a slow breath, letting the silence stretch until it frayed. Then I straightened my blouse and slipped the satchel strap off my shoulder. Their eyes darted to the bag. That's okay, I said, tone steady. I have everything I need. Carla's composure wavered. One corner of her mouth twitched as if she'd tasted lemon. Daniel frowned, leaning forward. What exactly do you mean by that? I think you already know. I met each gaze in turn. Dad left more than a letter. He left instructions. I tapped the satchel lightly. And I'm following them. Morgan's veneer cracked. Are you threatening us? No. I gave her the gentlest smile I could muster. I'm protecting myself. For the first time, Carla's voice shook. You're bluffing. I stepped back toward the foyer. Believe whatever helps you sleep. As I turned, Daniel muttered, She's got something. Panic flickered across his face, gone as quickly as it came. I paused at the doorway, hand on the banister. You spent years teaching me to stay quiet. I listened. But silence isn't the same as obedience. Carla rose so abruptly the chair creaked. This will ruin the family name. Then maybe it needs a new one, I replied, and walked out. The late-day sun had dipped behind the maples, leaving long stripes of amber across the yard. A gust rattled the wind chimes. Those copper bells Father hung when I was 8. Their music followed me to the car, a reminder of simpler truths ringing above the polished lies taking root inside that house. I didn't plan on revenge, not at first. But when I saw what they did next, I realized silence wouldn't protect me anymore. I pulled into my apartment complex long after dusk, windshield wipers scraping drizzle off a late fall sky. The 8-hour drive from Connecticut to Seattle would have been impossible, so I cashed in emergency miles and boarded a red-eye. Airports are good for thinking. Nobody asks why you're staring at nothing. On the flight, I kept one hand on my satchel, fingers brushing the spine of the ledger every few minutes like a pulse check. Now, inside my small living room, the quiet felt heavier than the plane cabin. I set the satchel on the coffee table, kicked off my shoes, and let the city's muffled hum seep through the cracked window. My calendar still showed library shifts, PTA meetings I covered for a coworker, overdue utility reminders, proof of the ordinary life I'd built while my family funneled funds into hidden accounts. The ledger stayed closed. I already knew its contents. I didn't need another look tonight. What wouldn't let me rest was the smaller envelope I'd shoved into my jacket pocket at the funeral. Dad's sealed letter, still unbroken. All afternoon his voice had replayed in my memory, but there were words he hadn't said aloud in that sanctuary. I wanted those words now, even if they hurt. I brewed chamomile because routine steadies me. Steam curled past the ceiling light, and for a heartbeat I pictured Dad at the kitchen table teaching me the proper way to steep loose leaves. Patience makes flavor, kiddo. My chest tightened. I carried the mug and the envelope to the bedroom, drew the curtains, and sat cross-legged on the quilt. The seal gave way with a soft crack. Inside lay 3 sheets, ink shaky but deliberate. His scent, faint cedar and menthol, rose from the paper, and grief hit so hard my vision blurred. Shannon, if you're reading this, I've failed twice. Once in life by staying silent, again in death by leaving you to face the fallout. He wrote that my adoption was never supposed to be hidden. He'd wanted to celebrate it, throw a party with balloons and sheet cake, but Carla worried town gossip would stain their reputation. Let her be grateful for a roof, she'd told him. My fists clenched at the phrase. How many times had she repeated it to me over the years? Dad continued. I let her fear dictate our home, and that cowardice cost you a childhood of certainty. I am sorry. He listed the trust he'd established under my name, 20 acres on Whidbey Island he inherited from his mother, a place I'd visited once as a teen, unaware it could ever belong to me. He included the bank's address, box number, and key location, taped beneath his old desk drawer back in Connecticut. A sigh escaped me. At least the plane miles wouldn't go unused. I wanted to transfer the deed before the end, but Carla intercepted the paperwork. She claimed you'd mismanage serious assets. Funny, she never questioned your ability to manage kindness, rent, or my medications when she was busy at charity luncheons. A laugh slipped out, wet and aching. He saw more than I thought. I've enclosed a notarized statement for my attorney, confirming my intention that you inherit the land and all royalties from my medical articles. Use them, sell them, burn them. Just don't let anyone convince you they're unearned. Tears blurred the next line, but I read it twice. You were never the maid. You were the lighthouse. Memories flooded, wiping his forehead during night shifts at the hospital, rolling his wheelchair onto the patio so he could feel sun on frail skin, reading him chapters of mystery novels when morphine dulled his focus. Carla called those chores appropriate gratitude. Dad had called them company. The final paragraph steeled my spine. If the family contests this, the ledger will protect you. Keep copies. Trust your own records over promises. I loved them, but I trusted you. I folded the pages carefully, slid them back into the envelope, and pressed it to my chest until the throb of loss settled into something steadier. Resolve. I wasn't alone in my knowledge anymore. I had his written confession, his blessing, his regret. That would have to be enough. The clock read 2:10 a.m. Seattle still sighed outside, distant sirens weaving through drizzle. I set the envelope in the nightstand next to the ledger. Tomorrow I'd call the bank, book another flight, crawl under the desk Dad once used to pay bills and hide truths. Tonight I whispered into the quiet, "Thank you, Dad," and let the words anchor me. I didn't know what I'd find in that safety deposit box, but the moment I opened it, the ground beneath my family's lies began to crumble. 2 mornings after I opened Dad's letter, rain drummed low on the roof of First Horizon Bank downtown. I clutched my coat tighter, walked past glass doors, and tried to look like any customer handling routine business, not a woman about to turn her family's story on its head. At the counter, I presented the safety deposit key, my license, and a death certificate copy. The teller's eyebrows rose, but she led me downstairs, keeping small talk to weather and traffic. The vault smelled of metal and recycled air. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Inside a private booth, she left me alone with a narrow steel box. My fingers tingled as I slid it forward. The lid groaned, revealing neatly stacked envelopes, a leather-bound photo folio, and one crisp manila folder stamped deed. I lifted the deed first. Blue County seal, notary emboss, Dad's signature bold. Parcel, 20 acres overlooking Puget Sound, deed still in his name. My name filled the grantee line, but someone, Carla, had scratched a faint X through it, never notarized. She'd tried to erase me with a pen. Next, I unfolded a letter addressed to his estate attorney, Mr. Harland. In Dad's familiar cursive, he wrote, "Formal transfer to Shannon deferred to protect her from household pressure. Execute upon my passing." My heart hit a new rhythm, steady, purposeful. The photo folio undone me, Polaroids from the late 80s, Dad cradling an infant swaddled in yellow knit. Another showed toddler me perched on his shoulders near a cedar tree, both of us laughing, pure and unguarded. I'd never seen proof of that softness. Carla kept only staged portraits on the mantel. Grief surged, loss of what could have been, and then raw determination rushed in behind it. I repacked everything and signed the exit log with a hand that barely shook. Outside, the rain had thinned to a mist. I headed straight to Harland & Cole, 6th floor of an old brick building smelling of history and lemon polish. Mr. Harland, gray-haired and thin, greeted me with polite surprise that turned to wide-eyed shock as I spread documents across his conference table. "This is solid," he whispered, tracing the seal. "Your father never mentioned holding back a deed." "He was protecting me," I said. "I need to know what happens next." He adjusted his glasses, scanning the letter. "Given the current dispute, these papers override any unsigned amendments. Legally, the land is yours. And with recent zoning approvals, market value has ballooned, over $2 million conservatively." Money registered, but the figure mattered less than the vindication. Dad hadn't just loved me, he invested faith in my future. Mr. Harland cleared his throat. We'll file a motion to admit this into probate this week. Expect resistance. Right on cue, his receptionist poked her head in. Mrs. Carla Jameson on line 2, sir, says it's urgent. Our eyes met. He picked up, spoke calmly, then covered the receiver. She heard you visited the vault. She'd like a meeting to correct obvious misunderstandings. I smiled, small and cool. Schedule it. Tomorrow works. He relayed the time. Her voice carried faintly through the handset, sharp, panicked. He ended the call and exhaled. That may be tense. I've lived with tense, I said. This time she'll sit with it too. Walking back to my car, drizzle kissed my face, yet the world felt strangely clear. I thought of Carla's careful facade, of Morgan's clinical dismissals, Daniel's practiced indifference. They relied on my quiet to keep their narrative intact. The deed in my bag was louder than any argument I could make. That night I spread the photos on my kitchen table beside the ledger and Dad's apology letter, a collage of evidence and memory. I snapped digital copies, several angles, high resolution, backed them up in cloud storage, 2 flash drives and an encrypted folder on my laptop. Redundancy is safety. Librarians know that. Phone buzzed past midnight. Unknown number. Carla, surely, or Morgan using a burner to avoid caller ID. I silenced it, letting the ring fade into the hum of the refrigerator. They could wait. I set the deed in a plastic sleeve, slid it under the pillow, and lay down fully dressed. For the first time in days, sleep found me quickly, not as escape, but as fuel. The next afternoon, Mr. Harland called. His voice carried cautious urgency. Carla wants to see you face to face. She's demanding it. I glanced at the deed on my desk, at Dad's handwriting blessing each margin, and felt a calm settle like warm sand. Tell her I'll be there, I said, and let her know I'm bringing paperwork of my own. I told him I'd come, but I wouldn't come quietly. Not this time. I arrived 20 minutes early, the city still shaking off dawn. Mr. Harland's office sat on the 14th floor of a limestone tower that once housed a shipping magnate. Polished brass, mosaic tile, places where power learned to walk quietly. I paused at the lobby mirror, adjusted the silver pocket watch at my wrist, and made sure the deed and letters were neatly clipped in a folder. When the elevator opened, I walked out feeling the same steady click of heels Carla once used to intimidate waitstaff. Today, the rhythm was mine. The conference room smelled faintly of lemon oil. Heavy drapes muted traffic noise, leaving a hush that hummed with anticipation. I set my folder on the mahogany table, poured a glass of water, and let the second hand on the watch mark each breath. 10 minutes passed. Then the door swung wide. Carla entered first, coat unbuttoned, but gloves still on, ready to handle dirt without leaving prints. Morgan followed, jaw tight, phone already recording. Daniel lingered near the threshold, pretending indifference yet scanning the room for allies. Mr. Harland closed the door behind them, offered seats no one accepted. Carla's voice sliced the quiet. Where'd you steal that deed? Fraud is a felony. I answered with silence, sliding Dad's letter, authentication seal visible, to the table's center. Her eyes flicked to it, then back to me. Read it, I said. Morgan scoffed. We don't have time for your theatrics. Harland interjected, calm but firm. This document came from Dr. Jameson's safety deposit box, accessed with his original key. The signature has been verified by a forensics lab. Carla snatched the pages. As her gaze moved line by jerking line, color drained from her cheeks. Morgan stepped forward, whispering, Mom? Daniel craned to read over her shoulder. I saw his expression shift from annoyance to unease. Carla slammed the letter down. Handwriting can be forged. Harland produced a slim packet. We submitted samples to the Superior Court clerk yesterday. Independent experts confirmed authenticity. A tremor crossed Carla's mouth. Even if the signature stands, the deed was never fully transferred. Intent doesn't override probate. I opened my folder, removed the authenticated deed, and flipped to the notarized clause naming me beneficiary upon his death. Morgan's phone dipped. Daniel swallowed. "That's impossible," Carla whispered, but the conviction bled out of her words. I spoke quietly. "You kept telling me I was temporary, that Dad pitied me. The truth is, you needed me to believe that, because the moment I stopped being silent, all this," I gestured to the room, to their stiff posture, "became yours to lose." Morgan's composure cracked. She slammed her phone on the table. "You're tearing this family apart." "The trust transfers were tearing it apart," I replied. "I'm just pulling back the curtain." Carla tried one last angle, voice trembling with rehearsed grief. "He was confused, bedridden. He didn't know what he was signing." Harland cleared his throat. "Dr. Jameson filmed a statement to address exactly that concern, time-stamped 2 weeks before his passing, clear of medication influence." He slid a USB drive across the table to me. "He asked that Shannon receive the original file." Carla's eyes widened. "You can't—" "I already submitted an encrypted copy to the court," Harland said. "Standard procedure." Silence pressed in, thick and final. Morgan gathered her purse, muttering something about legal counsel. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, then followed her out. Carla remained, gloves twisting in her hands. "You were always just temporary," she whispered, anger and desperation knotted together. "He kept you out of pity." I met her gaze, steady. "No, you needed me to be temporary, because permanence threatened everything you built on exclusion." Her glare promised retaliation, but there was nowhere left to strike. She turned, heels echoing across the marble hallway until the elevator swallowed the sound. Harland exhaled. "That went smoother than expected." "For now," I said, sliding the USB into my bag. He handed me a slim folder. "This contains the full recording, his last words to you. He wanted you to have it privately." Gratitude and dread tangled in my throat. I thanked him, shook his hand, and stepped into the corridor. The morning sun slanted through tall windows, lighting dust motes that drifted like slow sparks. I held the folder tight, feeling its weight multiply with every heartbeat. Back on the street, commuters hurried past, unaware of the shift in my universe. I flagged a cab, gave my address, and stared out at the city's rising skyline. For the first time since the funeral, the ache in my chest loosened enough to let confidence breathe. At home, I locked the door, drew the curtains, and set the folder on the coffee table. My fingers hesitated over the clasp. Part of me wanted to savor this moment, a pause before another truth unraveled, but anticipation overpowered caution. I opened the folder, retrieved the flash drive, and slid it into my laptop. I hit play, and there he was, my father, looking straight at me through time, the image a little grainy, the light in his study golden and soft. He wore his favorite navy cardigan, shoulders narrower than I remembered, though the stubborn spark in his eyes hadn't dimmed. He cleared his throat. "Shannon, kiddo, if you're seeing this, I've left the world and my unfinished courage behind." He managed a wistful smile. "I practiced this a dozen times, but words still wobble when the heart's heavy." The apartment around me felt suddenly smaller, as if the screen itself expanded to fill every corner. I sank onto the couch, drawing my knees close. "I know Carla and the others treated you like a guest in your own home," he continued, voice low, steady. I watched and said too little, afraid speaking up would implode everything I'd built. That fear was cowardice dressed as caution. He inhaled shakily. "Truth is, you were never a charity case. You're my blood, my first and only child by love, not convenience." I felt my chest tighten. Dad paused, eyes glistening. Before Carla, there was Elise. Brilliant smile, a laugh that tilted rooms. Our time was brief, then a car skidded on black ice, and she was gone, leaving you behind at just 6 weeks. I panicked. An unmarried resident with a newborn wasn't the headline I could weather. Carla offered practicality. Marry her, adopt you, give you stability, but quietly. Tears blurred the screen, but I didn't look away. I thought I could protect you within silence. Instead, I sentenced you to it. He rubbed his temple, expression pained. Every time Carla clipped your wings, I told myself I'd fix it tomorrow. His voice cracked. And now tomorrow belongs to you. He leaned closer to the camera. I didn't just choose you. Elise and I chose you. You were always mine. I just never found the backbone to say it aloud. Forgive an old fool. Silence stretched, only the faint hum of machinery behind his words. Finally, he straightened. The land is yours, the journals, the royalties, but more importantly, the right to be seen. Use my name if it helps, or leave it behind. Live loudly, kiddo. You deserve daylight. He raised 2 fingers to his temple in the boyish salute he used to give me before kindergarten, and the video ended, screen fading to black. I sat motionless, tears sliding soundlessly. Years of sharpened loneliness began to soften, not erased, but reshaped, like sea glass losing its edges. My whole identity shifted from tolerated outsider to hidden treasure. When the clock on the stove read 11:42 p.m., I rose, pocket watch ticking against my wrist, and collected the tiny brass key to Dad's grave marker box, the one meant for flowers. Outside, a cold drizzle settled over Seattle, but I drove north anyway, wipers beating a steady confession across the windshield. Evergreen Cemetery lay quiet under floodlights. I followed the gravel path until marble slabs gleamed. His headstone stood simple. Frederick Jameson, 1953-2025. He healed, he listened, he loved. I knelt, the damp earth soaking through my jeans, and placed the pocket watch atop the stone. You should have said it sooner, I whispered, fingers brushing the cool metal. But I heard you. Rain pattered softly, as if the night itself was holding its breath. I stayed until the chill seeped through my coat, then rose, wiping wet strands of hair from my cheeks. Turning to leave, I caught movement at the wrought iron gate bordering the cemetery. A silhouette, tall, rigid, unmistakable, Carla. She stood half in shadow, half in the spill of the street lamp, hands gripping the bars like they were the only thing keeping her upright. Her eyes found mine. They didn't hold shame, only raw fear, the kind that flickers when the ground begins to crumble under constructed lies. For a heartbeat we stared, history crackling between us, rain filling the gap words once failed to bridge. I stepped forward. She backed away, shoes skidding on wet pavement. The gate clanged shut behind her as she disappeared down the sidewalk, the sound echoing through headstones. I exhaled, feeling the night widen around me. For the first time, the silence wasn't suffocating, it was possibility. Her eyes burned, not with shame but with fear, and for the first time in my life, that emotion wasn't sitting on my shoulders. It was on hers. Carla stepped out from behind the cemetery gate, coat collar raised against the drizzle, though the night was warmer than either of us deserved. You edited that video, she hissed, every consonant clipped. Deepfakes are everywhere. No court will swallow this stunt. I didn't bother arguing. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and withdrew a plastic sleeve, its notary seal glinting under the street lamp. DNA confirmation, revised will, attorney signatures, proof stacked neat as a sermon outline. I handed it over without a word. Her hands shook so hard the pages fluttered like frightened birds. She scanned the header, then the line naming me primary successor of Dad's publishing rights, sole caretaker of the family estate. The blood drained from her face, leaving her lips the color of salt. He promised, her voice cracked. He said my girls and I am his girl. The reply came calm, surprising even me. He just finally said it out loud. For a heartbeat, I thought she might tear the documents, but greed trumped rage. She smoothed the sheets, slipped them into her purse as if hiding them could erase the ink. You'll drag us all through mud, she whispered. You already did, I said, turning away. I'm just watering the soil so something honest can grow. I left her there beneath the lamp, raindrops stippling her coat, head bowed, not in mourning, but in the dawning realization that control had changed addresses. 3 weeks later, the old press downtown smelled of ink and possibility. I'd painted the door teal, rewired the antique Heidelberg, and hung a new sign, Shannon Wells Press. Dad's middle name, Mom's maiden, and my future stitched together. First run, a limited reprint of his medical essays with foreword crediting the daughter who watched over him. Reporters called, alumni circulated gossip, but I kept the quotes short. The work mattered more than the noise. Across the alley, in a second-floor office I rented cheap, the foundation for foster voices took shape. A lawyer friend filed non-profit papers. A retired English teacher volunteered to host writing workshops. I funneled the first royalty check, $7,000, straight into scholarships. Nights were still quiet. The apartment hadn't grown, but ownership changed everything. I rearranged furniture, repotted the half-dead ficus, replaced bulbs with warm Edison lights that made even rainy evenings glow amber. No more pacing halls, waiting for a call that never came. Silence, once a sentence, felt like a conscious choice. One Friday, a large envelope arrived from the county social service office. Inside was a photo of Michaela, age 10. Freckles, anxious smile, placed with a foster family in Tacoma. She loved drawing horses, the note said, but art supplies were optional in the budget. I drafted a quick letter on thick cream paper, embossed with the new press logo. Dear Michaela, someone once told me stories can build bridges when walls feel too high. Enclosed is a small grant for sketchbooks and pencils. Draw every bridge you need, from someone who once felt forgotten, but wasn't. Not really. Shannon. I sealed it, slipped in a prepaid gift card, and felt a warmth spread beneath my ribs that no inheritance figure could match. Back at the desk, I straightened a framed photo. Dad holding toddler me, both of us grinning at something outside the frame. Beside it rested his pocket watch, no longer ticking, but I didn't need the gears to measure time anymore. I traced the watch's smooth edge and let my pulse slow. Carla and the others would keep wrestling with lawyers, but the outcome no longer threatened my worth. I had the land, the press, a name that finally fit, and a father's voice anchoring every step forward. I didn't get justice by screaming. I found it in silence, in truth, and in the name I chose to keep.